Hey there.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm
Morning.
good. Welcome, Jeffrey and Douglas Squirrel, who are going to tell us about when we're frustrated. How do we transform conversations and improve our culture? So I'm guessing you guys have some slides to share.
That was a good guess. Now we also, though, we do typically when we do this live, we have an interactive bit that we do with an audience.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
we've never met Sharon.
Yes.
Okay. So we were wondering if you'd be willing to, at some point in our talk, when we have that live interaction, that we could ask you a couple questions.
Sure, I'll try and be quick. I hope I got some of the answers, but yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
So feel free to start sharing, and we'll get your slides set up.
Yep. So I think I should have the slides shared now. Are you able to see that?
Just appearing. There they are.
Fantastic.
Okay, and I'm gonna opt out of the stream and let you guys take it away from here. But I will remind folks that there's a donate button, and the founder of SNCC will be matching all of the donations until the end of the show. So you will have definitely more impact with your donation from now until the end of the event. So please do keep donating. We need to find a cure for COVID. So take it away, folks.
All right, thank you. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining. I wonder if there's anyone who's been doing this for 20 some hours at this point. I'm not one of those people. I got a good night's sleep last night. How about you, Squirrel?
I just woke up, so I'm all set. We're in
Okay.
England, so sun is shining, the sheep are out, everything's good.
Yeah, although I don't have quite a good view of the sheep as you have.
No.
So just a bit about who we are. So my name's Jeff Fredrick, and I'm a longtime software executive. I've spoken at DevOps Days a few times, so here talking the DevOps track is something I'm excited about. And we're here in part because we were invited by Patrick Dubois. We've known Patrick since 2008 when we met at KitCon. And Squirrel and I have known each other since 2006.
Something like that, and we met at KitCon too. If you don't know what
That's
KitCon is, coming later, we'll tell you about that. But to introduce myself, I'm Squirrel. That is my name, but you can also call me Douglas if you'd rather. And I live in England. I'm a consulting CTO, which means I work with lots and lots of different companies, about 80 in the last 5 years, and draw all kinds of conclusions from them, which we're going to try to share.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about stuff that you and I, Squirrel, we've been studying for about 8 years, and we're very exciting because we've been able to distill this into a book that we have that's going to be coming out in May, which is just shockingly just next month. After a couple of years journey, we're almost there, and it's really the lessons from that book that we're going to be highlighting here today, and in particular, if we kind of go from the high level version, like the major message that I want people to get away from this is that if they're frustrated, that's a very valuable signal that there's something that you could be doing differently.
And the key word in that sentence is you.
Yes, exactly. And that's our hope, is we want to give you something that you could do differently today. That this is something you could apply today. I suppose, unless you're one of those people who've in a different time zone and you're just about getting close to midnight, maybe that's not
tomorrow would be okay.
Tomorrow's fine, but you shouldn't have to wait. This is not a long-term plan. This is something that can get results very quickly.
And it may not be obvious exactly how this is linked to DevOps, although if you were paying attention to the last speakers, that actually should be pinging in your brain right now. But we'll explain as we go how this is linked to DevOps, Agile, those sorts of things, because it may not be obvious immediately.
Yeah. Well, one of the ways I think that maybe some people who are listening would understand the connection is if they understand that they're in an organization that's going under a DevOps transformation. Now, I know that for people who've been doing DevOps for a long time, that might seem like a strange idea. But there's one thing I can guarantee you, that no matter how familiar the DevOps might be to you, that there's other people who it's just brand new to, and who it's just blowing their mind. And this might
Where do I hire a DevOps? I need a DevOps. What does one look like? How do I write the job description for a DevOps?
Yes, exactly. So there are people there who are just at the beginning of the transformation. And if you've already come through it and you've come through successfully, well, in a sense, kind of why are you here? Maybe you're not frustrated. Maybe you're like, no, everything's great. I'm just worried about why those other people are frustrated, which that's fine. But we'll say this, for usually what I've seen when people come in to do their DevOps transformation, it doesn't have to be DevOps. It could be an agile conversation. It could be an agile transformation. It could be a DevOps transformation. These days, you hear a lot about a digital transformation. People often end up frustrating, and one of the key reasons that they end up frustrated is they come in thinking that it's about different practices and different processes, and it turns out that it's actually about people, and it's about changing the culture. And that ends up.
What do I need? I need Kubernetes and Terraform and one of those stand-up things. And yeah, do we have? Good. We're all set. We're all ready. Everything's good.
Right.
This leads to disaster.
And I know one of our motivations here about writing our book and dealing with this issue around transformations was a book called 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and where they said something very similar, which is that it's really important that you have, if you want to change the dynamics in your team, that you're addressing the culture. And in fact, they talk about the very first dysfunction. Do you recall what that is, Squirrel? Certainly.
Yeah, I talk about it all the time. So that's trust. So the first dysfunction is to not have trust. And I was very excited when I read the book and you've probably read books like this if you haven't read this one. And it says, oh, yeah, so you're supposed to fix trust. And here's what trust is. And here's how bad it can be if you don't have trust. So definitely have trust. And then I was like, where's the part where I learn how to create trust? It wasn't there. Actually, it turned out there's this thing way in the back that I found years later. And it describes like going on a ropes course. And that didn't convince me that was a good way to create trust. So I threw the book across the room. I was really frustrated. I wanted my money back. So I was definitely frustrated, Jeffrey.
Right. So we're going to try to link that frustration that you had and the frustration other people might be feeling with this larger question of culture. Because a lot of times people are saying, yeah, we want our culture to change because the problem is those other people, they have the wrong culture.
I just have to convince them to do the right thing, and then it'll be fine. That's
right. Now, one of the things that's interesting to think is you can start with what's the culture that you're starting with, and we're using here the model of Ron Westrom and the 3 cultures, which is something I first came across in Accelerate with Jeankin, Nicole Fosgren and others. And this model of the 3 cultures is really interesting to me. And now there is a bit of a tell about which one's the good one and which one's the bad one. It kind of the choices your culture is pathological, bureaucratic, or generative. Now, if you know nothing else other than the names, which of the 3 do you think you'd want to be part of?
Oh, I guess I got to be pathological, Jeffrey. I love being pathological. It's so great. No, you always know that the first 2 are the ones you don't want to be, and the third one is the one you want to be. This is
right.
The classic plot of any talk like this.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, whatever company you're in right now, you are within some sort of culture. And when people are frustrated, it's usually they perceive other people as behaving as one of the first 2. They say, people are either pathological, this is a top-down hierarchical organization, or it's just bureaucratic, and all that matters are rules and people protecting their turf. That why aren't people focused on the mission? Why aren't people focused on being better? And that's kind of the source of their frustration. Now the thing is,
stuck a poll in the chat in the Track DevSecOps channel. Appreciate it if anybody who would like to would respond to the poll. Which one do you think you're in?
Oh, excellent. So we'll have you go. If you switch over to Slack, you can go ahead and fill that in now, and we'll check.
Or keep listening to us. It's okay. We don't mind, but we like interacting with our audience, so we'd like a sense of where you guys feel you are.
Hopefully, you can do both. Hopefully you can still listen to us while flicking there. If you're quick, you won't even miss the slide change. But we'll say that whatever culture you're part of, when you go to transform, when you go to make this change, odds are you saying we want to end up with a generative culture. However, your approach to that transformation will probably reflect the culture you're part of. So in a pathological organization, the transformation is typically directed top down and just imposed, and you're just going to be writing roughshod over the bodies. This is what we're doing, and if you don't like it, too bad. and then at the end of it, turns out that doesn't create a generative culture. A bureaucratic culture is one that I've come across more and more frequently, and I think it might be something that has to do with people who are later coming in, being people who are sort of saying like, well, this is the standard now. We're supposed to do the DevOps standard thing. So where are the forms? Where are our DevOps forms? Is this in the Scrum rule book? That's
page 72 or page 79. They don't seem to match.
That's right. I have my ITIL guide to DevOps, so it's all going to be okay as long as we just follow these forms and go through this process. And again, following the rules isn't a great way to end up with a generative culture. So ideally, you want to be approaching your transformation the same way that you want to end up. So if you may be in a pathological or bureaucratic environment, but if you try leading your transformation that way, it's unlikely to end up in a generative result. And this is where this connects to you, because you might be saying, well, what is it that I can do to change the type of culture I'm in? If I want to move from pathological and bureaucratic, what is it I need to do to end up at the generative culture that I'm aiming for? And our claim is that you can do that by changing the conversations. If you change your conversations, you change your culture. So
if you type the poll correctly, you get the right poll. So I just realized I did the poll wrong. So apologies, I redid the poll. If you want to go in, you're welcome to. You could only vote for one choice. That was not that was kind of pathological of me. Apologies.
Right. Choose from this list, and there's one choice.
Thing. Yeah, that wasn't very good. Let's try that again. Keep going.
Okay. So here's the thing: is that you are part of your culture, and your behavior will change it. Now, what we're going to be talking about is some theory that goes back into the 70s. So this is not, in a sense, new. What's new, I think, is it being brought into. We're hoping is to be bringing it mainstream into the way organizations work today, for people to understand that they can personally start changing the conversations and generating that generative culture that they want. And the good news here is that you don't need to learn a new philosophy. In a sense, you already know what the results look like. You know how to have a conversation that's one of these positive generative conversations that lead to good results. And this is the point where we'd really like to be interactive. So if Sharon was available, this would be excellent.
Perfect.
Oh, here I am.
Fantastic. All right. So we have a question for you.
Sure.
You are going to be deciding the date of next year's All the Talks conference. It's up to you to decide the process we should use, and we're going to use everyone who's listening right now to the stream to make.
We're all going to make the decision, but Sharon's in charge of how we make the decision.
Yeah.
Does it have to be super corporate? Can I use a doodle?
You can use
It's up to you.
I would probably crowdsource it. I would see who the organizers are, get a general understanding of who would be on board with the logistics and things of that nature, and I would try and gauge the best dates by giving you a few options.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly if we were targeting a few keynote speakers or folks we would want to target, probably check with them also and see that we can have an intelligent mix of the people that would need to organize and folks that we would want to have speaking available on specific dates.
Great.
Makes sense. If I can check that, then you'd share your own opinion, like your opinion about who the keynote speakers might be and who the key people were to talk to. And so you'd be transparent about what you were going to do, and you'd be curious about what everybody thought, because somebody might know like a conflicting date, right? Have I got that correct?
Yeah.
Cool. You win the award. You're like everybody we talked to.
And Patrick endorses
your answers on the next slide.
So I'm no one special.
You are absolutely special, but you're special just like everybody else, because that's a very human answer to say that's how you'd like things to be. That's how you would like to behave.
Yep. And according to Patrick, you have the job. He likes your
Woo!
approach.
Excellent.
That's awesome.
So the thing is, and I think you, Sharon, that was the interactiveness that we needed. And the thing is, when Squirrel and I have asked this question of lots of people, and I mean, not always, where we're going to, the date for next year's all the talks, but it's something. Usually we ask people like where we're going to go to lunch or something.
That's much more important.
But the thing is, we always get this answer about, well, I would be curious and I'd be transparent. So everyone already agrees that that's the best way to make a decision. And because everyone understands that, well, guess what? If we want a diversity of opinions, and that's strength. If we want people to share their ideas, we want to have them to share how they got to those ideas, share their reasoning, and that that we should have some back and forth, some productive, collaborative conflict, and that's the best way to get to the best possible answer. Now, everyone says that. The thing is that this is not how humans behave when there's something that they care about. Put another way, you actually do behave that way when it's something that you don't care about. If you get brought in to mediate for other people on a topic that's not very interesting to you, you'll recommend that. But if it's your own decision that you're part of, and you're really concerned that you get the right answer, and you have an opinion on what the right answer is, then suddenly your mindset changes. Right?
So, for example, imagine that you were going to come in and advocate a particular piece of software, and I'm not going to touch the debate, but it might be Kubernetes, or it might be your favorite Azure tool, or whatever it is. I'm not going to get myself in trouble by picking one, because I know what people would say is, well, I just have to convince people. I just have to give them all the information. And then once they have all the information, then of course they will choose the obvious correct choice, which is fill in technology X.
Right, and so that's the problem, is that when we have a decision we care about and we've invested time and energy to come to a position, we're now attached to that position. We're no longer seeking the best answer. We're seeking to have our answer win. And now, instead of diversity being a strength, differences are a threat. And as a result, we no longer behave in that generative fashion. We no longer are transparent. Instead, we don't share everything that we know. We don't share how we got to our decision, because we're just looking to say, no, this is obviously the right thing to do. And we don't listen to others. We're no longer curious about what they believe. What's going on here? We're going to give you a very simple model. Again, this is not something we created, and it's something called the ladder of inference. And it could be that many of you have heard of this before, or this might be your first time coming to it. If you were to go search on the Googles and look for ladder of inference, you'll find lots of pictures of ladders with lots of different rungs. The details of every single step here isn't really the important part. The key elements of this, and why this model, and what we like about this particular picture, is that it makes it clear that most of the ladder is inside of your head. That there are some parts that exist in the real world, like things happen, and then we take action in the real world. But between stimulus in the world and our response in the world, we go through this instantaneous step from selecting data, assigning meetings, making assumptions, coming to conclusions and beliefs. And guess what? The beliefs we have go back and influence even the data we see at the beginning. And if people who are familiar with that sort of feedback loop, that sort of selection bias, they can understand there's cognitive biases at work here. So we have this process going on in our head, but we're not aware that it's happening. Instead, it feels like there's something that happens in the world, and then we have the right answer. And it's just objectively correct that this is the right answer, that there's only one way to interpret it.
So, Jeffrey, I observe that we have about 8 minutes left before Q&A, and the meaning that has for me is that we might need to accelerate a little bit, and I assume that you agree with me and that you conclude that we should move on to the next slide. Is that right? Have I shared my ladder effectively?
That was
what I didn't do was say we should move to the next slide. That's
right, because then if you had just said that, then I might say, well, no, I think we should stay here. But
you have some other way of reasoning to it that we would not have shared. And that's what winds up happening here on this slide. You see this on chat shows all the time, where you have one person who says we should close the borders, and somebody else says immigration is great, and they just argue about it. And what they never do is come down the ladder and try to understand the other person's position. And the ladder gives you a nice guide. I've had people even write it down on their hands so they can refer to it and say, where am I on assumptions? Am I on meaning? Where am I in the middle of the discussion?
And this slide essentially encapsulates, going back to our title here, if you're frustrated, our expectation, our belief is that you're probably in a situation with dueling ladders, where you have some opinions, someone else has other opinions, but you haven't shared all of the steps of your ladder, and you haven't inquired into all of the steps there. So you haven't been curious, and you haven't been transparent. You haven't been behaving the way that Sharon did earlier in how she would approach making a decision, how any of you would espouse other people make decisions. So that's the paradox here. What we're going to talk about next is what you can do about it. And we're going to give you a very simple model you can apply called the 4 R's. And
Jeffrey, we forgot something. We forgot to tell people to bring equipment. I feel terrible. There's this important equipment that you need, but I hope our listeners will have it around. It's a piece of paper and a pen. So I hope everybody is possessed of those rare pieces of equipment.
That's right. It's very very high tech, and we're going to walk you through now the steps that it takes. And again, this is something you should be able to do today. So when you're going to look at your conversations to understand where you can improve them, you're going to go through these 4 steps. There's the record step, and this is why you need the paper and pencil. You need to reflect. And we're going to walk you through how to do that. There's different ways to reflect. We're going to talk about something very simple, which is just this issue of, are you curious and are you transparent? Then, having discovered where you fell short, you're going to revise what you've done. And then, ideally, you're in a situation where you have someone you can talk to and you can role play your alternative dialogue. And by the way, along the way, you might discover that once you've revised, that you can repeat and reflect again to say, did you actually improve it? And did I role play? Could I make it better? Oh, and then if I do role reversal and hear what it sounds like. Okay, so there's 6 4 R's. Okay.
Yeah, but just counting. I think somehow our maths isn't good. We only have 5 minutes left, so we shouldn't try to correct our maths.
Right. So let's go with first record.
This is the very technical part. You need some origami. You need to fold your paper in half.
All right. So if you can do that. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll write the conversation that would have shown up like on a video recorder. So they said, I said. They said, I said. Maybe they stood up, left the room, I pounded the table, whatever, things that would show up. On the left hand, you're going to write down the invisible, the thoughts and feelings in your head, right? And then normally would give you 5 minutes, but we don't have time for that. So you can be doing it now. And I think, Squirrel, you're doing this real time.
I certainly am, and I'm already done.
Yeah.
Great. There we go. I just finished. So that's how long it should take you. You just have to write down a little bit of what they said, a little bit of what you said, and that's only the things that you heard, and then what the thoughts were on the left-hand side.
That's right. So you get those elements that are frustrating. And then you reflect on what you've done. So you go back and it's just real simple. We're going to look for curiosity. How many questions did you ask on the right-hand side? Just circle the question marks and then ask yourself, were those genuine questions?
Big fat 0 for me. I didn't ask any questions. That's normal.
Okay. That's
that
pretty
means I
common.
wasn't very curious in this conversation.
Now, sometimes people will ask questions, but they're not very genuine questions.
Jeffrey, shouldn't we finish in 2 minutes? We've got the Q&A.
Right.
That's not a genuine question.
That's more of a statement.
Because there's only one answer.
That's right. And then on the left, you'll say, what was I thinking and feeling that I didn't share? And this is where we often find, okay, so I'm not being curious. I'm not asking questions about their ladder of inference, and I'm not sharing my ladder. I'm not sharing what I know and how I got there. I'm not sharing how I'm feeling.
That sounds like I'm dueling.
Exactly. And as you do this over time, you'll tend to find triggers. You'll tend to find repeated patterns of, this seems to happen again and again. And so that's what you find in your reflection. So then you go to revise. And when you revise, you now say, well, how can I be more curious? How can I be more transparent? Is there a way I can ask a genuine question, meaning a question where the answer might actually change my mind?
Yeah, so I might ask, Jeffrey, I'm curious, do we want to go into the Q&A or do we want to continue now? I'm open to either. That would be probably a more genuine question.
Yep. Well, I'm very keen to get to the Q&A, but I do want us to get.
I'm only giving you a hard time. Go ahead.
That's great. That's fantastic. But it's good for us to get to the last of the 4 R's. It'd be a shame to give them 3 of the 4.
I agree.
So as I said, you look for the questions, and then you look on the left to say, was I able to bring some of the thoughts I had and some of my feelings into the dialogue on the right? So a key tip here, if you're frustrated, very often you can start being more transparent by using the words, I'm afraid. As in, I'm afraid if we were to go down this route that we might be missing X, Y, and Z.
I
So
like
I'm
that. So
afraid.
my revision could say, I'm afraid that I haven't answered that question before. That was how I was revising my particular conversation.
Right. And so then last, if you have been able to, once you've gone through and you created a script and you've revised, now maybe you've gone back around the sort of the revise and reflect cycle multiple times until you have something in writing that you like. Then you try role-playing with someone and say, how does it sound? No, am I happy saying this? Now, Squirrel, you just got to role-play yours.
Yep.
So how did that feel to you?
It felt okay. I'm not sure I had the phrasing quite right, so I think there's some more to improve there. But it was helpful to share the feeling I had, which was, I don't have any idea how to answer this.
And this is where the role reversal is. If you have a friend you're practicing with, you might have them say it back to you, because sometimes things that you find just totally natural saying, when you hear them, you go, oh, I don't like the way that sounds. I wouldn't want someone saying that to me. So you have another chance to revise. So that's it. That's the 4 R's: record, reflect, revise, and role play. And the thing is, the outcome of this is very predictable. This is something that is there in the theory that Squirrel and I picked up from Chris Argyris, and it's something that we've seen in our own practice over the past 8 years, has made a huge difference for us. Now, it's not something that comes instantly. This is a skill you're developing. Chris Argyris said it takes you about as long as it takes to play a passable game of tennis. The good news is that unlike tennis, unless you're a tennis pro, this is something you can practice every day. Every time you're in conversations, every time you're in meetings at work, every time you're frustrated, you can think, oh, this is a way for me to go back and say, how am I contributing? How could I be more transparent? How could I be more curious? And we think you'll get better outcomes as a result. So this is one of the elements of our book. In our book, we go through 5 other types of conversations where we apply this same theory, where we reflect in different ways and revise to different outcomes.
And you can get these slides, so you can have a look at this in more depth and detail than we have time for today.
Right. And so with that, I think we should go over to Q&A.
Yes. So that was fantastic. First of all, you guys are a dynamic duo. It's really fun. So a few questions. How do you convince your colleagues to be open about?
I'll just stop you right there. So the problem I've already detected in word number 4. So when you start a sentence with "how do you convince," the problem is it's your fault. That's good news. So you're frustrated by something, and it's your fault. So what you should do is recast your question. So instead of trying to convince them to be open, what you might do is have a conversation with them in which you share your reasoning. I have been to this crazy talk at some crazy time in the morning, and these insane people told me that I should talk to you more. Would that be helpful? What do you think about that? My reasoning for that is that I think we don't have very good conversations, and here's an example from last week. If you had that kind of conversation, the result is likely to be better. They may not be convinced. So it may be that you get convinced. That's the whole point of the dueling ladders, is that on the chat shows, you never see somebody say, you're right. Actually, we should close the borders. I understand that. Can I join your party? That just never happens. Right. So we are looking for the option of having that kind of change of mindset. And when you do that, you're more likely to get a better result. So
words matter. You got to choose the right words. And
in your own mind. So this is your own mind. How do I convince? So you stop thinking that.
Okay, so as a manager, how can I foster this open culture, and what benefits does it give me as a manager? Also, I guess, to the team.
Jeffrey, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the benefits are better decision making as a group. Also, that people are happier with the result because they feel they're part of it. And this is like adding your own egg. The people if people usually are happy, not just if they get their way, but if they feel like they've been heard. So they're quite happy to go along and commit to things that they weren't their idea, as long as they feel that people have heard them out. So that's, I think, one of the big benefits here of both transparency and curiosity. You get more ideas from people, and so therefore you have better decisions, and people are more committed to the result because they've been heard. And how do you foster it? Is the main thing is to be transparent and curious yourself, much like you modeled for us earlier on the question of when would we host the conference. If you go with that idea, like we're here to get all the possible information, people generally, I find, are quite happy to take you up on that invitation.
And let's say that your manager isn't, the type that would be as transparent or,
So we're not the manager. Now we're working with somebody who manages us. Is that right? So if you're in that situation, I claim that you're going to be net better off if you don't go to the top of your ladder, if you don't start dueling. And the reason is that if you just join the other person at the top of the ladder and just argue, there's no chance whatsoever that anyone will find out what your reasoning was, that you'll be transparent, or that you'll have any chance of finding out what the other person thinks. If you ask questions and you're open to them, and you might, for example, find out their reasoning. They're really interested in telling you their reasoning. They aren't much interested in hearing yours. But that's still helpful to you. That's still ahead. You've got half of it. You've got the curiosity. You haven't got the transparency. And that's still a net win. I've never heard anyone. I'd love to hear an argument for why it would be better to simply not share anything, to have no sharing either direction for arguing. That simply presents the dueling ladders problem.
I'll say this is a common question we get in our experience. We tell people is if you start this way, you'll change the way other people behave. They will react differently when you act differently.
And not guaranteed, but it's more likely. And there's no we don't know another way to get to that changed behavior. So
you're the catalyst.
Exactly. And the theory is called action science. That means you can go experiment. So go do an experiment. Try this out. See if we're right. If we're wrong, please get in touch with us and tell us we're wrong. It went by very quick, but we're on conversationaltransformation.com. So you can come and find us lots of ways there.
Awesome. And very last one. How would you see this improving team stand-up?
Jeffrey, can you take that one?
Well, I thought you would jump on as your first one, since you're.
It could be, but I feel like you should take us out.
Okay, I think the stand-ups, a lot of it will probably be in the retrospective where you describe your stand-ups, because the question is, are your stand-ups already okay? The real question is, are people sharing the relevant information, and are they curious about what other people are saying? If people are showing up to stand up just to say their bit and they're not listening, then you're missing on that front of curiosity. You can also say, well, are there important elements that you're not sharing in the stand-up? Then you might be missing transparency. So it's a good test there.
And a fun game to play is to think, gosh, if we had some secret information, someone was holding a secret key, and you got an award if you found out what it was, imagine that during the stand-up, your goal is to find out what that is. And that's a fun game because it makes you be very curious about the other person. And in fact, it's usually true that there's some piece of information in the group that you don't know. It's just that you don't know about it, and neither does the person.
Right. That was fantastic. Thank you both so much for joining us at all the talks. Every speaker and panelist helps contribute to charity. So thank you for taking the time and sharing with us.